there's a way to make an entrance.
This is my destiny.
It was now a conspiracy of witches.
Download Veely today.
Astronomers noticed that the way stars were moving in galaxies, they weren't just pulling on each other, that there was something else there. There was more of it than what we could see. And so that's why it's called dark matter. So you can't see it, but it's there holding galaxies together.
I don't know where David is. Where's David? David! David, where is he?
Woman.
So, David, maybe the 21st century will be the century of philosophy?
The larger theme that I keep hearing from different places is, what does it mean to be human in this time? Because the people are sort of like, we're a little disoriented. Most of my friends who were fellow activists were involved with what I would now call fighting enclosures of the commons, the privatization and commercialization of our shared resources. Things like public lands that have minerals or timber, the airwaves that broadcasters use, federal research money for drugs. All of these are being privatized, and we might pay for them, we might have a moral entitlement to them, but they're being enclosed. They're enclosures of the commons. Well, I was involved in a lot of political action around these issues in terms of laws and regulation and mobilizing public opinion. But at a certain point, I realized that the Washington, even the liberal vision for social transformation is not going to get us to where we need to go, especially now where politics is so captured and corrupted that representative democracy is in some ways a joke. What's going to happen is we're going to start building alternative functional systems outside of it that can reach a sufficient scale that the major system will say, oh, something else is going on in here. And so there will begin a negotiation and clash between an alternative vision and the dominant one.
I have Jackie with candies, this paper. I have the pumpkin. This one. Hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Qué precio tiene la no se olvida.
there are great many people who have absolutely nothing here, and a few people who have everything, and a very tightly squeezed small middle class. People look at this as sometimes as a problem of the late stage of capitalism that we're living in, but I think it's important to note that if you look at the entire history of Mexico, you have the same sort of a structure. Even if you go back to the pre-Hispanic days, the social structure was in the form of a pyramid with a few very, very wealthy kings and princes and a royal family, and the rest of the population was virtually slaves.
Aquí tenemos doctores, tenemos ingenieros, arquitectos.
¿Pero están en eso porque ganan mejor o porque no?
Porque no hay oportunidad de trabajo.
Exacto,
Pues ya
exacto,
ha sido
sí.
muy escaso, entonces el mercado es una alternativa para buscar tener una economía un poco más o menos
Claro,
estable.
claro.
Porque los salarios mínimos son completamente bajos.
Exacto.
La oportunidad de trabajo es muy escasa.
¿A qué horas se levanta? Porque usted tiene que ir a partes
Sí.
muy distintas de la ciudad, muy lejos, me imagino, de su casa.
Desde las 2 de la mañana. Vamos a la central de abasto, buscamos la mejor mercancía, cargamos y de ahí nos vamos a los puntos de venta.
Sí.
Entonces, aquí es el primer lugar en donde en la mañana aquí dejo mi mercancía, la tapo, ya después ya comienza a cobrar vida el monstruo del mercado.
Exacto.
Se comienzan a armar puestos, pero aquí dejo mi mercancía un promedio de 4:30 a 5 y me voy a otro lado, se llama Tequesquinahuatl.
Wow.
Cerquita de acá, ahí ya llego a las 5, 5:30, hago el mismo procedimiento. Entonces, si me da tiempo de descansar o dormir una hora, hora y media, lo hago, si no, pues ni modo.
¿Y a qué horas llega a la casa de usted?
No, pues a la casa de usted ya llegamos 8, 8:30.
Wow, entonces es una jornada
Sí, es una jornada muy dura.
súper dura.
Que le voy a decir, sí vale la pena porque aquí gano lo que pues en una fábrica podría yo ganar. Por decir, si en una fábrica gano un salario de 50, 60 pesos, aquí pues me gano 200. En México está muy mal pagada la mano de obra.
Don Albino, quiero agradecerle mucho por ayudarnos en el proyecto.
Estamos para servirle.
Ok, estamos en contacto. Sí.
ande.
Y manda saludos a Arturo.
Muchas gracias.
Hasta
Ándale,
luego.
Hasta
Sí.
luego.
If you're young and you're poor, you're worried about how am I going to help my family out today? How am I going to feed myself today? You might not be worried about how am I going to change the world? How am I going to revolutionize my country? You're probably thinking about how do I put food on the table? How do I help my mother put food on the table? I mean, today something like 50% of the economically active population lives from the informal economy with no safety net, no public resources supporting them. Most of them are selling to
The universe has been expanding. All of the universe that we can see is expanding. So it's been expanding ever since it started. But for most of that time, the expansion was slowing down. So when we look back in time, we can measure how fast the universe is expanding, and we see that it was expanding faster when it was very old, and slower as time went on. Until relatively recently. Relatively recently for a cosmologist is, a few billion years. But at some point during the age of the universe, it started to speed up again. So it slowed down in its expansion, and then it started to speed up again. And the speeding up has to be caused by a new type of matter. So ordinary matter, the stuff that this chair is made out of, and the stuff that we're made out of, if you put that into Einstein's equations, it only slows down expansion. But if you put in, you have to put in a new ingredient into the equations to make the universe start to accelerate again in its expansion. So we observe that it accelerates, and we have to put in this new ingredient, and this ingredient is called lambda. That's the lambda in lambda called dark matter cosmology. But there's not an underlying theory for where it comes from. And so that's why it's an exciting thing. There are lots of ideas for where it could come from, but what the game is to really try. The game is trying to break the theory, really, because if you can make the theory break, then you've got some clue as to where it might come from. You get like a kind of crack in the armor. You're trying to make problems for yourself, because if you make problems for yourself, you can find out whether your theory is right or wrong.
Empezar a rapear nos llama más, pero el problema es que nunca se superó. Puta madre, aquí todos tenemos un mismo sueño, ser grandes en el rap, porque empezamos como pequeños. Ahora resulta yoga fan, hasta es barbero, ese güey corta cabello. Ahora, ¿cuál es tu pretexto? Tu pinche navideña madre, de seguro te ha crejado. Inclusive seguro va rebanado. Este tipo de raperos me parecen retrasados. Si no hubieras nacido, Walt Disney te habría inventado. Potencia. Estos raperos siempre son contradictorios. Esto vale tal seguro, sonará el instrumental. El verguerismo es opcional, pero el punchline obligatorio. Es obligatorio, no eres un sicario. En mi vecindario los matan al diario. Yo veo que tienes mucho agravio. Lengua punto constante y se te secan los labios.
No lo sé, ves cómo viene tan solo que se expande. Es justo contarte a diario con este blanco tan grande. Tú date cuenta que no puedes ser de un freestyle. Si no puedes hacerlo, perra, tú nunca has vivido calle.
Pensarán.
A través de los años yo logré identificar o se me hizo común empezar a ver grupos en Latinoamérica, ¿no? O mi interés empezó a enfocar en grupos en Latinoamérica, ¿no? Entonces ahí pude identificar o encontrar ideas en común en muchas de las agrupaciones, ¿no? Ideas que suceden o contextos que parecieran ser muy diferentes, pero al mismo tiempo tienen muchas relaciones en común, como grupos que trabajan temas políticos y sociales en Chile, donde la intención es buscar generar una opinión y una visión crítica acerca de la sociedad. Digo, la juventud en Chile en concreto, la que está entre los 20 y los 30, viene de un proceso post-dictadura, ¿no? Donde muchos de ellos regresaron o muchos de ellos nacieron y crecieron ya ahí en ese contexto, ¿no? bien particular en cuanto a recordar el pasado, ¿no? Otra de las que he empezado a acercarme es el empoderamiento de las comunidades indígenas a través del rap, ¿no? Entonces, hay bastantes ejemplos. Pedro Mo en Perú, que él rapea en quechua. En México hay, por ejemplo, Pat Boy, que él rapea en maya. El rapero de la montaña en mixteco. Del rap en Latinoamérica es traer justamente esas identidades y decir, son importantes, ¿no? O sea, son parte de la historia de Latinoamérica, ¿no? Tanto el pasado indígena como la influencia africana que tiene muchos de los países en Latinoamérica.
I work with the families of the people who are in jail accused of murder in the United States. And these are people who have nothing or next to nothing. And most of them have a great dependence on the Virgin of Guadalupe or Jesus Christ or, whichever figure they believe in. And let's put it this way, I see the good side to that and the bad side to that. The good side is that it's all they can count on. But the bad side is that there's a very fatalistic attitude. I think the way Catholicism works in Mexico, there's a strong fatalistic element. It's like, whatever the Virgin has in store for me and my family, I will conform with that, and maybe next time around I'll or after I die, I'll be in a better state.
Está bueno, ¿no? Recuerdo que también de los burros, siguen con los burros.
Antes pues había burros, ahora ya casi no hay burros. Ahora sí que aprovechamos toda el agua.
Ah, por eso ya no.
Sí, ya los burros ya se acabaron. Ya nomás uno que otro caballito, pero ya no se ocupa para el agua. Ajá. Ya lo acarreamos, como tienen sus carritos, pues van con los garrafones allá a la bomba. No tenemos nada y pues para nosotros el gobierno no ayuda. El gobierno ayuda más para él. Pues sí, porque no nos ayuda. Ustedes ya ven que la vez pasada nos vinieron a echar la mano muchísimo, porque nos pusieron los sistemas. Ahora son nuevas.
Pues van cambiando, vamos
No, sí,
mejorando.
claro que todo va cambiando. Hasta nosotros cambiamos. Estábamos más jóvenes, ahora ya estamos más viejitos. ¿No? Sí, todo va cambiando, todo va cambiando.
La tecnología de captación de lluvia lleva pues 5,000 años. Cualquier civilización, las aztecas aquí, las mayas en Quintana Roo, en sureste de México, todos hemos captado, vivido más de 5,000 años con agua de lluvia. Hace 500 años, si se ven todavía un lago, pero aquí hace 500 años la Ciudad de México tenía fue una ciudad, un valle con lagos. Así cuando llegaron los españoles había 5 lagos grandísimos y una población en la isla de Tenochtitlan de los aztecas. ¿Cómo cuántos programas se ponen el día?
Poner yo con un chalán.
Ajá.
Pues depende, si está cerquita de la bodega, pues uno y...
Y para hacer eso, no puede ser ustedes dos nada más. Necesitamos 2 grupos y también estamos pues, pensando comprar otra camioneta, todo. Por eso dice que tú, ¿cómo vas manejando?
Pues me compran una automática.
Siempre estamos buscando entrenar a más personas y entrenar más plomeros para que ellos los instalen ellos mismos. Tenemos diferentes proyectos donde así lo hacemos en diferentes estados de México, en Puebla, en Hidalgo, en Jalisco. Hemos entrenado a plomeros allá, ellos mismos los instalan, les damos chamba, les damos agua, el doble de beneficios. Nosotros, Isla Urbana, instalamos hace 5 años, empezamos a instalar ya pocos. El 2009 instalamos 5 sistemas. Ahí fuimos instalando cientos de sistemas. Ahora tenemos más de 1,800 sistemas, donde más de 10,000 personas están captando y viviendo la mitad del año con agua de lluvia. Somos emprendedores y nosotros vemos el mundo diferente que otras personas. Yo veo como muchas personas ven problemas, yo veo oportunidades como un emprendedor, como cuando salimos hoy y nos levantamos y dije, pues tal vez va a llover y unas personas, pues no es bueno, necesitamos una otra chamarra, pero nosotros vemos la lluvia que pues qué maravilla. Yo, pues un sueño que tengo es cambiar el mundo. Siempre he querido desde chiquito hacer una diferencia en este mundo para que, no sé, en unos 30 años yo puedo ver el mundo que hicimos una diferencia.
People don't realize that so many things are part of our shared wealth. Nature, water, the air we breathe, the internet, education, our civic commitments. All of these constitute a kind of common wealth that is now subject to a massive silent theft. If you have a pasture and everyone can put their sheep on it, no individual farmer will have an incentive to hold back and not overexploit the pasture. So this will inevitably result in the overuse and ruin of the pasture, the tragedy of the commons. Well, this has been taken as a truism for describing any shared resource. It can't be done. But Eleanor Ostrom, a political scientist at Indiana University, spent decades of her career showing through painstaking field work and creative theorizing that commons are entirely sustainable if there are certain structures and principles for how people self-organize themselves, and that people can self-organize themselves without either the market or government being involved. Well, this was a radically different idea that economists didn't like to hear.
Medellin used to call itself the city of the eternal spring. That was before our winter in the 80s and the 90s. A winter that everyone knows in the world of hatred and so many problems. When I was a teenager, being from Medellin and being a guy with my last name was being something dangerous. That's not happening anymore. We had years of homicides. We were untouchable in the world. We were stymied because we were like a problematic city. Corruption, allowing traffickers to do what they wanted to do. Just don't mess with me. I'll do my politics and you'll do your business. And that created a divided society. And of course I think it was dangerous, but we were not thinking at the time of how impossible and how dangerous it was. The only thing we were thinking is that it was fundamental. If we wanted a city for our children and for the next generations, we needed to participate in politics and do it in a very simple way. Walking by the streets, talking to the people. We didn't have money at all. At the time, we didn't have money to participate. We only had flyers and a short speech to a taxi driver or a bus driver or someone who is getting out of the train station, the metro station, and that's what we did. So what we did is create these numbers of public spaces. Libraries, botanical garden, science park, new schools, and all those spaces were spaces open for the whole community. In the case of the school kids, they had in the library parks their after-school programs. They can get out of school and then enter into the library park and have an access to the internet, to art, to music, to whatever they love. We decided that our work has to be done exactly where it is needed, not where it is seen, but where it is needed. So we went to the periphery of the city, where the poorest neighborhoods with displaced people by violence or by economic reasons are living now. So there is where we do most of our job. Also, we understood that the kind of infrastructure that we had to build was very far from the traditional, like American model infrastructure for cities. I mean, bridges, freeways, connectors, infrastructure for cars, for private cars. And we understood that we had to build infrastructure for encounter. We needed the people to gather together, to talk, to see each other in the eye, to learn to coexist. One of those projects, it's one of the landmarks of social urbanism, is Moravia. Moravia is the name of a place that used to be the city dumpster for decades. I think from the 60s or 50s to the 80s. And in this dumpster, in this place full of garbage, whatever, by the botanical garden, people began to sell informally and illegally on the rubbish. It was like putting together all the troubles you could imagine: violence, environmental problems, public health issues, and poverty, all over the dumpster. More than 10,000 people were living on and around the old dumpster, abandoned dumpster. So we decided to create an integral urban project, social urbanism, to recuperate the rubbish hill. Now we have a rubbish hill that is a park, do scientific treatment, engineering treatment to the dumpster, and relocate part of this population. Part in the same place they were, but in a place with dignity, small apartments, improved houses, and part in a place close to this library park we are in. And in this way we change the face of this community. Just to give you an example, when we began to work with the people of Moravia, they were afraid to put their address in their CVs when they were looking for a job, because being from Moravia was being from the dumpster. And if you live in a dumpster, you are rubbish, you know.
Amor, ¿qué hacemos? ¿Nos acompañamos al cable un poquito?
Sí, we can go with you to the cable. We can go and take the cables.
We're taking the cable.
No, we have to go to the stairs, to the electric stairs. Let's go.
Yo me llamo Juan David, soy parte pues de las vueltas. Hay veces que no voy y ayudo, sino que voy y juego y hay veces que voy a ayudar y ayudo a mi mamita y todo eso pues. Y cuando no quiero me quedo por acá jugando con amiguitos. Pues acá yo me siento feliz, bueno, porque mi mamita me da la comida, no me deja aguantando hambre y todo eso. No, Juan Carlos Higuita está en la cárcel. Y mi hermano...
¿Papá? Juan Carlos Higuita, sí, suave. ¿Él es tu papá?
Sí.
¿Hace mucho tiempo no lo ves?
Sí, porque le metí una puñalada a otro, porque otros estaban peleando ahí y era un amigo de él. Entonces se metió y le pegó una puñalada. Y mi papá ya va a salir de la cárcel, pero... Tira otra vez, saca una o dos, se la queda. Quedan dos. Cierto, la tira. Me queda adentro. Otra vez tengo que tirar. Y otra vez adentro, no. Soy muy malo. Ay, por fin. Ay, no, amigo, porque tanqué una raya.
Si je vous dis une particule est à deux endroits en même temps, clairement, ça n'a pas vraiment de sens. Ça, c'est pas, ou encore, la possibilité A a une probabilité de 30%, B a une probabilité de 30%, mais A et B ensemble ont une probabilité nulle. Donc, deux choses qui sont probables, quand on les met ensemble, elles deviennent impossibles. Encore une fois, ça défie notre logique. Donc, ce qui se passe, c'est qu'à l'échelle fondamentale, la mécanique, les particules obéissent à une logique qui est différente de la nôtre.
Oh, there's a noise. What is it?
I think it was someone with a cart.
Okay. Is the universe flat?
So whether the universe is flat or not is something you can actually measure from the cosmic microwave background radiation. And as far as we can tell, so you can only measure to a certain accuracy, but to within the accuracy that we can measure it, the universe does seem to be flat.
So I guess it's similar to the sort of being the standard trade-offs.
Let me think of how to say this.
The posing of the question of science and philosophy as separate and each can do their things and perhaps should grow together misstates the question. Darwin, he's been, I think, degraded and debased by a neo-Darwinistic free market worldview, that he had a whole lot to say about cooperation and symbiosis between creatures, and that there's a creative vitalism going on here that we need to study as part of science, not as an afterthought, not something later. So let's have science begin to have a new examination of itself the way people like E.O. Wilson urge, because I think many of them will discover a different vector, a different framework for studying the world. It's interesting, for example, that individual natural selection was taken to be the standard frame for evolution, but now people are starting to say that, maybe natural selection works at the group level and not at the individual level. So science needs to start, I think, some deeper introspection about ourselves, and I think in the process we'll find some new answers to man's and women's place in the universe.
Si nosotros no sabemos crear nuestra propia tecnología, vamos a terminar tercerizándola y va a pasar lo mismo. O sea, vamos a estar exportando recursos, que está bien.
¿Qué va a ser?
Lo mismo, o sea, educar en tecnología.
Colombia está entrando a un momento muy particular y es enfrentarse al posconflicto. Y ese posconflicto no solamente es la negociación de un grupo guerrillero con el gobierno, sino también un momento para que los ciudadanos empecemos a trabajar por algo muy importante, y es llevar instituciones a todos los colombianos. Hoy en día hay 15 millones de colombianos que no tienen ningún tipo de acceso a Estado. 15 millones de colombianos, de 45. Pero nuestra generación ha tomado la decisión de construir una paz sostenible, y esa paz sostenible empieza con la educación. Y mucha gente le pregunta a uno, David, ¿por qué es a través de la educación? Y nosotros le explicamos de la siguiente manera. En Colombia, el sistema de educación es un sistema que hace que se perpetúe la desigualdad. Colombia es uno de los países más desiguales del mundo, uno de los más desiguales de América Latina. Y cuando uno se empieza a analizar por qué existe eso, es por nuestro sistema educativo. Nuestro sistema educativo no permite que todos los ciudadanos puedan desarrollar sus talentos individuales. Y si Colombia quiere tener una paz sostenible, una paz duradera, tiene que tener un sistema educativo que saque lo mejor de cada uno de los ciudadanos. El presidente de la República se comprometió, Juan Manuel Santos dijo, listo, yo voy a aumentar los recursos de la educación, yo voy a comprometerme a ampliar la jornada, es decir, que los niños estudien más horas. Yo me voy a comprometer a que la primera infancia, es decir, los de 0 a 5 años, sean prioridad para el Estado. Pero aún el presidente Santos no ha cumplido las promesas que le hizo al país. Y por eso Todos por la Educación es tan importante, porque nosotros vamos a hacer presión para que esto se vuelva realidad. Pero no jugando el juego de criticar, sino de hacer propuestas muy concretas desde la ciudadanía de qué podemos hacer nosotros como ciudadanos para llevar educación de calidad a cada una de las personas que viven en esta tierra. For example, in Colombia, what we have to change is sometimes what we should do.
Al hip hop hemos salvado vidas en los guetos, estos muchachos que se encuentran en las calles sin hacer nada, encuentran por fin un arte fácil y accesible. Se da y es para unir, que sepa la gente lo que está pasando en diferentes partes de Colombia, del mundo, y eso, es denuncia, es social y es verdad.
Oh yes, because you
Okay.
when you move.
Sí, cuando te estás moviendo, ¿sabes? Se escucha mucho eso.
Yes.
Entonces, si quieres, muévete.
Recuerdo que a los 10 años escuché mi primer radio transistor, la música de Donna Summer, I Feel Love. Y esa canción me marcó mucho, me empezó a mover como las caderas, sentí como me gustó, me llamó mucho la atención. No sabía cómo se llamaba ni nada, pero empecé a escucharla y a bailarla, a sentirla. La luz, luces, la bola brillante, una luz negra, azul, que lo hacía mirar a uno como diferente, y el sonido del DJ que estaba colocando música diferente que no se escuchaba en la radio. Eso también me impactó, y había muchos muchachos bailando diferente. Quedé enamorado, fue como mi entrada. ahí salió el graffiti, conocí el graffiti, el human beatbox, el DJ, el arte del DJ, las batallas, porque pues necesitaba que mi espíritu bailara.
Who created music? It was created probably by God. And I think, I even not think, but I'm sure that when we read about the creation of the world, that it was created just a big drum and cymbals and music.
I'm standing on a floor, and the floor is being supported by electromagnetic forces, and just the forces within this floor are enough to support me against the entire pull of gravity from the entire Earth. And from a curiosity point of view, and also from a theoretical and mathematical point of view, it's very hard for us to understand why gravity is so much weaker than these other forces.
La dérivée temporelle de la fonction d'onde est égale à moins I, h bar est une constante, un hamiltonien et la fonction d'onde. Cette équation-là permet de décrire la force électrique, les forces nucléaires, etc. Donc, permet de décrire à peu près tout ce qu'on observe dans notre vie courante, mais pas la gravité. Donc, la gravité, ultimement, elle est expliquée par la théorie de la relativité générale d'Einstein. Une théorie unificatrice serait une théorie qui unifie ces deux choses-là, comme le mot le dit. Donc, une seule théorie qui a à la fois la mécanique quantique et la relativité générale. On a un peu épuisé tout ce que la mécanique quantique avait à nous dire. Donc, la prochaine étape, c'est de dire, mais comment unifier la gravité avec ça? Donc maintenant, ça devient un problème. Si on veut continuer à avancer, on dirait qu'on n'a pas le choix que de faire cette unification-là. La science, c'est vraiment un édifice. C'est-à-dire qu'on fait une découverte, on s'assure qu'elle est bonne, on s'assure que tout est vérifié, qu'on n'a pas fait d'erreur, et ensuite on construit sur ça. Et on construit, et on construit, et on construit. Peut-être que la mécanique quantique, fondamentalement, elle est fausse. C'est très difficile, par contre, de modifier une structure qui a survécu à 100 ans d'expérience et de prédiction et qui n'a jamais été contredite. Donc, il faut essayer de modifier la mécanique quantique de façon à ce que ça n'ait aucune répercussion sur 100 ans d'expérience. Et tout ça en demeurant élégant. Donc, moi, l'approche que je préconise, c'est de travailler à la base, de venir ébranler la base, et puis après ça, de voir tout le dommage que ça va causer.
Plus on va dans l'extrêmement petit, dans le microscopique, plus tout est symétrique, tout est parfait, comme une sphère est parfaite. et que plus maintenant on s'engage vers des structures complexes, là, plus ça devient, moins c'est symétrique. Hein. Donc cette symétrie de base que l'on admire dans les lois fondamentales, elle est toujours là, elle est latente, mais elle s'exprime d'une manière de plus en plus complexe, ça devient une structure très complexe. Ça devient l'univers compliqué que l'on voit autour de nous, ça devient des structures complexes dans les êtres vivants, par exemple, ça devient des phases de la matière qui sont assez diversifiées, mais il reste que ça provient de lois fondamentales qui sont extrêmement simples, extrêmement symétriques. Hein. Donc on peut décrire tout l'univers comme étant une espèce de dégradation de la symétrie.
On a un but qui est loin, souvent, un objectif qui est loin, donc il faut des étapes intermédiaires pour y arriver. Et quand on sait qu'on a atteint une étape intermédiaire, lorsque on a une formule ou on a des idées qui s'imbriquent de façon élégante, là on sait, ah oui, ça ici c'est tellement élégant que je sais que ça s'en va dans la bonne direction. Einstein était vraiment guidé par ce principe d'élégance-là. Il voulait la simplicité et l'élégance. Et c'est ce qui l'a mené à sa théorie de la relativité.
Now, being guided by beauty it can be both useful and not useful. So it can be useful in the sense that it's very attractive, following directions that seem very simple and very clear. And ultimately, we would like to come up with the most simple, most clear, and most basic description of everything. At the same time, it can also be a little bit dangerous in that the specific picture of the universe is not obviously, is not necessarily as beautiful, let's say mathematically, as it could possibly be. And the universe ends up being a much more complicated, messy place, or at least seemingly. But this also pulls us into new directions where, if you like, we can find new sources of beauty or a different conception of beauty than you might have initially started with.
The animal life has actually really got, sorry, I'm just seeing a bird behind you actually, just have a quick look at it. It's a chaffinch in a tree. It's a female chaffinch and she's foraging for food. There's a nest in there because I heard the male sing earlier. And what's interesting about the chaffinch is that the male sings right above the nest. So you can always, when you find the male, you know that the nest is directly below him. So he's probably sitting on the nest now, relieving the female who's just come out to relieve herself in terms of having some food. And I'd imagine that the eggs are nearly about to hatch as well. So she will be, they'll be feeding the family very soon.
That's fine, David, you can come back.
25 years, I've never been down there. The first time I became aware of watching birds was probably when I was about 4, I think, or 5. And then when I was about 6 or 7, I went to a local library and I found this book, Birds of Britain, Europe, Middle East and North Africa. And it had 1,200 species in it, and I couldn't believe it. I thought I found the Holy Scriptures. It was amazing. I read this book inside out, back to front, sideways, upside down. I knew every single bird in that book. I knew their scientific names, where they came from, what colours they were, the differences between male and the female, the distributions. I was a walking encyclopedia after reading that book. Paul is a guy who designed the beautiful cartoon on the Vote National Birds site website.
Hello, sir.
Paul.
Hi, sir.
How you doing, sir? You're right.
Did you vote for the national bird?
I voted for the hen harrier
Why?
because I think they needed my support.
So you're a good man.
I'm a very, very good man, but not as good as David.
I originally had the idea for the Vote National Bird campaign when I was 7 years old. I thought, wouldn't it be great to run an election to find Britain's national bird at the same time as the general election, and it would be a fantastic antidote to the boredom and drudgery of the political campaign. So they are the top 10 birds. People were able to vote for these birds between March the 16th and May the 7th, the actual day of the general election. And on May the 7th, we also got schools up and down the country to get their kids to vote on the same day, because the idea was that the kids can think about the fact that I'm an adult voting at the same day as my mum and dad, and also it teaches them about democracy, but also they research the birds, and it teaches them about nature and birds at the same time. And the kids loved it, so we had quite a few thousand kids voting on the same day as well. The actual winner,
I've been in movements, many movements, for quite a long time. I spent many years organising as part of the Wages for Housework campaign, and then the Global Women's Strike, which is... Sorry, should I start again?
Yes.
Okay.
Guys, can you be quiet for about 2 minutes, please, while the drum goes? Thanks.
Last winter, about 15,000 people died in the UK because they couldn't afford to heat their homes. And this is one of the richest countries in the world, and that is an absolute scandal. People do have rights to energy we can afford, but those rights aren't agreed by the powers that be, including the big corporations, and they're not enforced even when we have them. So people end up being like put on prepayment meters when they're vulnerable and shouldn't have a prepayment meter, and you know, in the end the power clicks off when you can't feed the meter anymore, or you have to choose between feeding the meter and feeding your children. You end up in the cold, you end up in the dark, people have insulin in the fridge, the insulin goes off. You know, it's a complete nightmare. The fossil fuel corporations had the power to take us all into a war in Iraq that nobody in the world wanted. Millions and millions all over the world demonstrated against that war, organized against it. Not only one big demonstration, but ongoing organizing, and they still did it. That's the power they have.
So in the end, you say what matters is that everybody does it, that everybody takes action.
And what matters is that we all look out for each other, that the people who are not worried about their fuel bills also support the people who are worried about their fuel bills, that the people in one country, a richer country perhaps, also worry what's going on with the oil in Nigeria, for instance. You know, these things are things that ought to concern all of us.
How can you flourish when you're feeling cold in your home while other people are collecting £1 million bonuses? They're letting old women die. I've got a 92-year-old mother, and I could start telling you about the pressure that she's under from the system at the moment. I'm Secretary of the Cybernetics Society. Cybernetics is the study of the common properties of large complex systems, whether they be computers, the internet, brains, ecologies, economies, states, whatever. And the main problems in the world today are due to our lack of understanding of the behaviour and the properties of large complex systems.
Okay, well this is Runnymede Eco Village. We're just underneath the flight path from Heathrow Airport. I wake up roughly about 8 o'clock, get the fire on the go. Someone comes down, you share a cup of tea, you do a little bit of work. I go outside and network with the outer community. And come back and cook an evening meal. It's about community, you know. Some people I say, oh, we should get a job and everything. Well, we work hard to live our lives. You know, majority of us live here with a limited income. You know, you don't need to have a job, a monetary job, to live life.
The concept of the house is to be built only out of waste materials, so either fallen wood from the forest or stuff that I found in skips and bins. I didn't want to be part of a system that basically means that a lot of people have to be in poverty so that I can have gas and running water and electricity in my house, and that people have to starve and we have to go and wage war on them so that we can use their resources and have what we considered a life in the first world country and supposedly civilized and developed.
Yeah, we got an eviction coming up. So roughly 2 months ago, we stuck in a proposal to see if the landowners would let us hold this in trust and to make it, you know, a really nice eco-village, to bring more outside community resources in and make it a place of sharing of knowledge. They come back a week later with court papers, and for 2 months we've heard nothing because we've had time to put our defence in. And then 2 days ago we're told we're back on court on the 15th of June, which is the same day of the signing of the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta.
So people here and around Occupy have explained to me that the Great Charter, which became the Magna Carta, and the Charter of the Forest, supposedly that was about getting rights for everybody, but it was orchestrated by the barons. In fact, we've got professors at the university here telling us there were thousands of ordinary people like peasants. I've got that wrong, Julie. You're shaking your head. You better start that over again. Do you want to wire up Julie? What have I got wrong? So in a way, we're only coming back to rights which were guaranteed 798 years or even 800 years ago to people. And it's kind of ironic that the forces of privilege are endeavouring to throw people out here on the same date as the original charter, 800 years, as Vinny said, after it was originally signed. Do you think this is for everybody?
Well, I think we've been so far removed from our natural environment that people can be conditioned to think that they live better the way they do. It's just like a bird. If it was born in the cage, you open the door, he's not going to fly out straight away.
We're seeing this collision of worldviews, essentially, which it manifests politically, and it's easy to simply see it as a political clash, but really it's a much more profound clash of worldviews. And how this will turn out, it's hard to say, but I think it's the struggle that we're going through as a culture right now to get to a different paradigm that is more sustaining of us as individuals and communities, and also more sustainable of our economies and civilization itself. But this is a struggle because many people have a lot of sunk investments in the old paradigm. And I think part of the problem is that even the forces for change, or say they're for change, like liberalism, are so committed to this ideal of progress through growth and technology that they're unable to get off of it and realize that certain values, certain needs, need to trump the interests of capital.
We didn't really think that that would be an option for us until we, sometimes we just have a thought, and it sort of came to us as the perfect idea almost. It was like, why don't we just do that? We didn't know what we were doing, and at least I was wondering, like, what have we actually given ourselves into, because it was quite hard, engine broke down, and it was just like coming things, like, oh.
Yeah.
But then,
it was difficult in the beginning.
Yeah,
the engine broke down, and so we were like, the engine runs everything on the boat. It charges the batteries, it heats the water. So without it, you don't have running water, you don't have electricity. So it was just like living in a cold shell, in winter, which was awful. But luckily we had my dad, so we could ring him up and he could help us out.
Yeah, we rang him all the time asking, this is smelling like this, we can't get this to start, what is it? And he was like, this, that, is this, you check this.
But then, it was quite amazing, wasn't it? Because we'd never thought we could own anywhere in London. We considered buying a house in Sweden, and then we thought we'd try living in London for a bit, because Sanna wanted to see more of England. And then it's just not, you just don't feel, it's not possible at all to live in a house in London, to buy a house, you know what I mean? It's just impossible unless you're a millionaire, because it's just far too expensive. My friends have all got good jobs, and they've got big money saved up, hundreds of thousands of pounds, and they still can't afford to buy a place within the M25.
But then on the other hand, you see now that's the same thing that's happened with the flats and the housing situation on land in London is sort of happening with the boats as well, because you see we're on the forum on Facebook where all the boaters are. It's called London Boaters. And you see so many ads now with people renting subletting or letting their boats, and you see the prices go, and with the tension with the land people living on the side of the canal, you see what's like a fast-tracked version of what's been happening with the housing situation, which is quite sad, really, because we just, and people can sometimes be like, we are the part of the problem because we are quite recent on the canal, and people are like, it's you guys, before you guys came, like a big wave, it was all fun and games on the canal, and we had space and there was no tension, and now there might also be some kind of crash, that the Canal and River Trust, to take care of the canals and the rivers, that they might put new legislation in, or start restricting the boat life in a way that is actually not as good to live on the canal anymore. And then we sit here with the boat we can't use or can't sell, and that there might be some kind of crash like that. So I don't know if the whole maybe there has to be something completely different.
A total crash or something. I think that's the only way people will listen. The politicians, I mean, because like you said, there's lots of activism already. When there was a question about the Iraqi war, whether we should go into it, we marched on London, like the biggest march London's ever seen. I think it was 9 million people or something. I was part of it. We got in buses from Sheffield and all came down, and nobody listened to a thing we said. It just doesn't work, you know what I mean? People just get poorer and the rich just get richer. The gap is ridiculous in London. the people that complain about us when we're moored up in Angel have like £5 million houses, you know what I mean? And it's just impossible for anybody else.
Hi there, I'm collecting stories for £1 today. I'll give you £1 if you tell me a story. Hi there, I'm collecting stories for £1 today. I'll give you £1. I will give you £1 if you tell me a story. Hi, I'm collecting stories for £1 today. I'll give you £1 if you want a story. Hi there, I'll give you £1 if you tell me a story. I'll give you £1 if you tell me a story. Go.
Well, it was a kind of a bit of a surreal day. It was a long time ago. It was about, I think it was the early 90s, and my mum wasn't very well. My mum was dying of cancer at the time, and I had to go up to Glasgow to see her when she was in the hospital. And I went up with my brother in the car, and it was a very strange day because, you know, obviously you've got a lot of emotions, and it feels like you're swimming through treacle for the whole day. And we got to the hospital, and it was just awful. We had to go. It was a big Victorian building. We had to go up this big sort of spiral staircase. I've got the worst vertigo in the world, and I was like trying to sort of crawl along the wall to make sure that I didn't see the precipice. And then we were talking to her for a while, and she seemed so unwell. It seemed just like a shadow of herself. And it's strange that, you know, quite often the first person that a person sees dead, the first dead body that somebody sees is their parents. But anyway, we spent an hour there talking to her, and then we had to drive back to my hometown Ayr. And when we were sort of driving along, we had to go past this airport, and I just looked outside, and this plane was taking off, and it just flipped onto its back, hit the ground, and blew up. And neither one of me and my brother even took a second look at it, because it just seemed to be one of those days, you know, and it would just put a big sort of full stop on it. So it was just this weird, streamy, surreal day that everything just seemed like it wasn't really happening.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that with me.
Okay.
Here's your £1.
Thank you very much. Is it a real one?
That's a real, yeah, you can bite it, that's real.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to stop that, and then I'm going to save it.
That's a great hug.
I think very positively about the future. People want to make their lives better. People are trying to be happy. Like everybody, every single person, all they're really trying to do is be happy and make the people they love happy. And over a long enough time period with diverse enough people, that can only tend towards people finding the things that make the most possible people happy and using that. If I find something that I understand about the world that makes my life happier and I can share it with somebody else that makes their life happier, we can actually make progress towards understanding the world in such a way that we increase the floor, we raise it, we get people to feel better, live better lives. But it's going to take this feeling of frustration. I think the idea of a big switch around change comes from this feeling of frustration that we build up the whole time. But actually this frustration is generating its own change. It is the motor, the engine for change, if you like. Change isn't something that necessarily resolves that. We want a better life, and the more access to information and perspectives we have, the more frustration we feel. We can now see anywhere in the world, we have access to a world of information, and thus we can contrast what we have with what we can expect to have, or what we want to have, and contrast that with what other people have, and actually look at a world that we want to create. The more information we have, the more we can imagine that, the more we feel frustrated, the more we create change.
We just see you at the pub now. Sorry? We'll go to the pub.
Okay. I was out with some friends.
I'd just come out of a marriage. I was married for 9 weeks, which was a personal best. I needed to recover somehow, and I wanted to go on a bike ride, have friends, drink beer, and I was cycling. But I was cycling in a competitive way, and I wanted to do something that was non-competitive and more fun. And so I started this website, and I was looking for other people who just wanted to relax and have fun on the bike, like we did when we were kids, but now as adults. When you're a child, the first bike you ever ride is a tricycle, and the pedals are fixed to the wheel. So when you pedal forwards, you go forwards, and when you pedal backwards, you go backwards, and when you stop pedaling, you stop. And they don't give you a brake as a child, they just give you pedals fixed to a wheel. And this bike has pedals that are directly fixed to the wheel. So forward and backwards, that's what happens. It's very little effort to keep going, but it's a lot of effort to start and stop. The result is that you want to always move. And it's a liberating thing. But you naturally, because it's so much effort to stop, you look further down the road. Instead of looking your braking distance, you look 200 meters down the road, and if a light is red, you will slowly adjust your speed through your legs. Your legs are an intrinsic part of this machine. It extends your body. And you will slow yourself down. You flow through the city. You don't stop-start. You just flow. It's like meditation. It's more zen. It's more peaceful. So when I was younger, I grew up in poverty, and there was crime and there was violence, and it wasn't a good place growing up. And I didn't have many friends because I wasn't at school all the time. I was ill, and then I was homeless for this period. And when you're homeless, you have to find a way to survive, and one of the ways to survive is to create friends, and those friends will do things for you, give you a place to stay, give you toast for breakfast, and they'll take care of you. So I'm very introverted, but by being homeless, I was able to talk to people and sort of build up a confidence and an extroversion, and from that you start realizing that strong communities and friendship groups can do so much more for every person in them, and it became a pattern, a recurrent theme, that I would always attempt to create these groups of people, and not for my benefit, but just because the world is better with them. And when you ride around London, you get a sense of the geography of the history of London. You see the dock areas, which are traditionally poorer, the east side, which is traditionally poorer because the pollution would travel east on the winds, so the rich people would live to the west and the poor people would live to the east. And you can still trace the inequality for the ages through the actual geography of the city. And what's interesting is that every generation seems to reinforce the inequality of the prior. There's a lot of view, even in English politics at the moment, about the idea of the benefits scrounger, that someone is not worthy, that they must go to work. I don't really buy into that. I think that actually you can just treat people with dignity and give them a living wage, and if you treat them like humans, they will bloom and flourish. But if you treat them like scum, they will become scum. And so I think that, there'll be suffering in terms of people living in poverty for a lot longer. But I just think it's inevitable that automation and computers will destroy our current society as it stands. How many taxi drivers are there in London which will be wiped out by a driverless automatic vehicle? How many people do deliveries in white vans that would be wiped out by automatic vehicles? What if you could do all of those deliveries at night, so you don't even have any of the traffic around, and the cities become more livable? What if during the actual day, instead of 90% of cars spend 90% of their time parked, what if they didn't have to exist because you went and just said, I want to get a car, and a car just turned up and it just carried you wherever you wanted to go. So people didn't have to own cars. And if that was the case, what if people, no one had to work in the factories to produce all of these cars that sit around? If you look at, through history, moments where there was a spare capacity of human energy and they didn't all have to work, like when the Greeks discovered agricultural farming and the ability to have wealth, they were able to spend more people investing in the arts, investing in thinking, investing in philosophy, investing in how the world works, taking interest around you, and that's phenomenal. And I don't think that anything is going to come from the wealthy, but I think that those who are of working class more will be unemployed, and will reach a point in the next couple of decades where automation has made the vast majority of jobs redundant. And I think people will need something to do. And I think what they'll do is there'll be the equivalent of a living wage, where instead of benefits keeping you on a minimum subsistence, that everyone just paid a flat wage regardless of whether or not you work. And people can pursue more stimulating, interesting futures. Does that make sense?
That sounds good. That sounds very good.
If something is far away from us, it's taken the light from that thing. Say if it's 1 light year away, it's taken the light from that object a year to reach us. So we're seeing it as it was a year ago. Even when we look at the sun, we're not seeing the sun as it is now. The sun is, I think it's a number of light minutes away from us. It could be 8. I think it's 8 light minutes away from us. So we're seeing the sun as it was 8 minutes ago. I'm seeing you as you were, some millionth of a second ago.
This fact becomes the most useful and the most interesting when we look at the universe over very, very large distances. When we take our telescopes and we point them at the sky and we look at things coming from there. Because since we're looking at things that are very far away, the light when those objects produced it is very old when it gets to us. And the furthest we can see back corresponds to leftover energy from the Big Bang. And this leftover energy from the Big Bang is sometimes called the cosmic microwave background. And it turns out that if you take essentially a thermometer and point it at the sky and measure this leftover energy, you measure what comes out to be an effective temperature of about 3 degrees Kelvin, something like minus 270 Celsius. And this background energy, this background light, was emitted when the universe was very, very young. And by studying the temperature and the temperature fluctuations in this cosmic microwave background light, we actually get a snapshot of the universe when it was very, very young. And in this sense, it lets us see back in time.
Suspending mosquito ko ibi ato. Saso, como tonton preko. Saso.
Right 90.1 FM suni adesemama yesama makwa babio edeba kasafidie bakopa ne abribia omode babi te se eye edwen labi a wono oba program ba ko a right 90.1 FM so ayetu din kuapayo na edwen.
Yeah.
All right, mami mimbisa we abribia no yete se ye kuapayo right FM kuapayo no eye den dwumadi ene yedi
yɛtumi boa ma yɛn nso yɛn kua yɛn edum pɛmpɛn so a Ghana yɛn kra nnuane mfi obi ma so ne yankasa yɛbɛdi ɛndeɛ ɛwɔ man Ghana mu tie dɔm ase abre ne abre nyina mu ɔmota yɛchi ne yɛde nipa ɛde bɛbrɛ wɔn yɛfa sɛ mefa ne sɛ maize production na yɛkɔ abo sɛ ɔno ne sɛ dua ne pam but
Drubra yakwa kudua bura yɛka sɛ yɛnua ɛhwɛ amra baako ne de aburo bɛyɛ sɛ 7 ne de agum yɛkɔka sɛ da bi yɛpɛ sɛ ba bebree na yɛnte ase evi sɛ wode dodoɔ ne ɛhyɛ amra ne mu no sɛ na woka no no krapa na mbisa dwumadie no sɛn na mudi no mokwakuafo no no mokɔkasa anaa moyɛ ne sɛn
sɛ wokɔ ne nkyɛn na woyɛ te sɛ ɔno a wokɔ ne shoes mu na wohu sɛ deɛ ɔbrɛ even say wakɔ ekuafo afu mu krampo no nkyerɛkyerɛ do kɔ kyerɛ bɛma akɔ ne mu na obetumi ate aseɛ sɛ nkyerɛkyerɛ wodi kyerɛ na sɛ ɔma ohu sɛ wodi ne nyinaa nyɛ pɛ because wokɔ a ne nsuo ɔnom ɛsɛ wonum bi
nkyerɛkyerɛ a yɛde ma ɛyɛ ekuafo good agricultural practices sɛ ne ɛbɛyɛ a yɛbɛyɛ kua no na yɛyɛ ne papa ɛzan sɛ aduane deɛ yɛdi akɔyɛ mu nti wontumi ɛnyɛ ne biara saa ɛwɔ sɛ wotumi adua no ɔkwan pa so a yɛahyehyɛ ɛde yɛato
On nous a toujours dit à l'école que l'Afrique est le berceau de l'humanité. Donc, je m'intéresse aussi à ce continent. Je dis, excusez-moi si je dis, le vieux continent. Je m'intéresse à ce continent. J'aimerais aussi aller à l'Occident. Pourquoi pas aller découvrir d'autres choses, faire d'autres connaissances. Mais l'Afrique reste mon continent. Je ne peux pas quitter et oublier l'Afrique. Laisser l'Afrique derrière sans retourner derrière voir l'Afrique. Voilà, c'est une communauté où, pour adhérer à la communauté, tu n'as pas besoin de payer un fonds comme les autres communautés. Je suis rentré ici, c'est toujours comme dans ma famille aussi. Parce que moi, d'habitude, si je travaille avec un certain nombre de personnes, à un moment donné, je ne les considère plus comme coéquipiers ou bien quoi, je les considère aussi comme ma famille. Donc, arriver ici, ils m'ont pris aussi comme la famille et puis on est ensemble ici. On rigole, on dit tout ensemble.
Tu as fait la rencontre au lab de Sénamé. Je ne sais pas comment. Sénamé, est-ce que tu es directeur ou est-ce que tu n'as pas...
Ah, il va choisir ses mots. On va voir comment il me voit.
Monsieur Sénamé, qui est le fondateur de Wellab, c'est un bon monsieur, je veux dire, on sent que vous êtes sérieux, vous voulez faire progresser votre communauté. Et puis, du coup, ceux qui sont à votre alentour auront le même esprit que vous avez et votre mentalité, votre philosophie, ils seront dans le même bain avec vous.
Il a plu il y a 2 jours, donc ils ont tout recouvert, mais c'est là qu'on a nos outils. C'est ici qu'on fait le bricolage, qu'on bricole en fait. Donc, voilà, vous avez une Wafat qui est en fabrication. Donc c'est vraiment ici l'espace Fab Lab et bricolage. Un Fab Lab, c'est un label en fait qui a été développé par un professeur du MIT qui s'appelle Neil Schatzman. Et en fait, moi je pense que c'est très inspiré de quelque chose qui est déjà dans la culture américaine. C'est les makerspaces, c'est ces petits garages où les gens bricolent. Un maker, pour définir un maker, ce serait en quelque sorte quelqu'un d'insatisfait qui veut pouvoir avoir le contrôle sur ce qu'il utilise, quoi. Il ne veut pas subir sa machine, et il ne veut pas que la machine soit au-dessus de lui, il veut pouvoir comprendre la machine, comment elle a été faite. S'il a une machine qui est censée pouvoir saisir du test, s'il veut en faire une machine qui produit du glaçon, il voudrait être libre de faire cela, en fait. Donc il se donne les moyens en mettant la main dans la machine, en se documentant, mais aussi en se mettant en réseau avec d'autres personnes qui ont cette même insatisfaction que lui. Et ça fait des gens qui bricolent, qui inventent de nouveaux produits, qu'ils s'empressent tout de suite de partager via des documentations en ligne, etc. Parce que pour l'instant, on est quand même très tourné vers l'étranger. En fait, on ne produit pas du concept en Afrique. Je pense que c'est un de nos gros problèmes. On se contente de consommer des concepts qui ont été élaborés ailleurs pour des contextes qui ne sont pas vraiment les nôtres. Il faudrait qu'on puisse penser pour nous-mêmes par rapport à ce qui sont nos cultures fondamentales, nos façons de faire, etc. Ou alors qu'on prenne des concepts pensés ailleurs, mais qu'on fasse l'effort de les convertir aux réalités africaines, et pas juste les prendre telles quelles et venir les implanter. C'est ce que nous, on a voulu faire avec le mouvement, avec ce concept des Fab Labs. On a vraiment voulu créer des Fab Labs, certes, mais qui est une dimension très africaine. Mais si on l'a fait, c'est aussi parce qu'on a vu dans le mouvement Fab Lab quelque chose déjà de fondamentalement africain. Ici, c'est la Wafat, une machine qui est élaborée avec le déchet d'autres machines et la première imprimante 3D développée en Afrique. C'est un peu notre mascotte, c'est ce qui nous a fait connaître partout dans le monde. Et le tout dernier prix qu'on a eu, c'était il y a quelques semaines, c'est le prix NetExplo, qui récompense les 10 meilleurs projets au monde qui ont le potentiel de changer la vie. Voilà.
Quelqu'un qui se connaît et dit, bon, je vais atteindre cet objectif, tu n'as pas besoin de dire, même si une mouche te pique de côté, le moustique peut-être te pique de côté, tu vas dire non, ce n'est que de passage. Je vais laisser ça, c'est pour progresser. Donc, venir ici, prendre 1h30, venir ici, sans négatif rien sur moi, c'est du sport aussi.
Dans nos sociétés de tradition, il y a souvent ce qu'on appelle le système de classe d'âge. Donc, on est dans une classe d'âge de 6 à 18 ans, après on passe dans une autre classe d'âge et on devient mentor de ceux qui intègrent la classe d'âge que nous on guide. Et donc on a décidé ici que tous les projets auraient des leaderships tournants. En tant que leader de la communauté, tu avais aussi quelques challenges propres. La communauté OSM était dans un état quand tu as hérité de la direction. Dans quel état tu nous la rends? C'est ça que j'aimerais que tu nous dises.
Aujourd'hui, nous sommes dans le mouvement de partage. Il faut partager ce que l'on connaît, il faut donner. Il ne faut pas vouloir toujours s'arrêter ou bien se limiter sur ce qu'on a. Je suis dans un lycée technique. Je ne suis pas géographe, mais j'ai pu savoir comment mapper les zones, tracer les voies. J'ai su comment faire d'une carte, utiliser une carte sur une machine sans être géographe. Donc toute personne, même la vendeuse d'à côté, elle serait très fière parce qu'elle est en train de voir sa maison sur une machine sa maison sur une machine, oui, avec la connexion, elle sera très fière. Comme j'ai été très fière d'avoir vu ma maison sur la page web. Chaque jour que je me réveille, chaque jour que je fais, je pense toujours au WELAB, même si je ne viens pas. J'ai toujours en tête que le WELAB existe, que je dois aller pour travailler. Donc, du fait que ça se reprend dans le continent africain, ça fait que nos produits, ou bien ce que nous avons imaginé fabriquer, ça fait développer l'Afrique tout d'abord en domaine technologique et sur le plan de la connaissance intellectuelle, nos produits fabriqués, nos objets fabriqués fait avancer l'Afrique.
You're welcome here to Agubloshi. AMP stands for Agubloshi Makerspace Platform. Part of our real goal is to help bring some of you all who are, particularly those of you who are students or recent graduates who have, really amazing technical knowledge. And once you reach Agubloshi, it's not about what you know. It's not about, oh, I got these great marks on this exam. It's about what can you do. We see Agubloshi not as a problem, right? There are plenty of problematic dimensions to it. There are plenty of issues. It is indeed a very toxic place. But at the same time, there's all these negatives and these downsides. And the goal of AMP is to take this scrapyard, e-waste sort of so-called dump, but it's really more like a recycling center, and to help invent and create tools and technologies that can transition this into a center for digital fabrication and advanced distributed manufacturing. So we believe that it's actually possible in this very space where you are right now to build the future of not only Africa, but the future of Earth.
Yeah, you have to explain it quite fast. But I guess, okay, there's another way we can power it.
I don't know where David is. Where's David? David! So, David, are you trying to set the gen? Okay, so maybe when you, or can we do this first? I want to move your computer over here. So can you work with them to move the computer here? So then David, also maybe if you need any of this, all your pieces, you pack it here. Then when we come back, it'll be cool.
As you can see, like there's lots of food.
This one was your door.
Yeah, one of my container door.
The door used to be there before they broke it.
Oh, we are losing our containers, our place, our fridge all scatter. You know? All this thing, all they scatter everything. We are losing our money, our big money, all we are scatter all our money.
And I think it's a powerful testimony to the challenges of the so-called informal sector, because someone can invest time and energy and resources to try and build up an infrastructure which is actually completely designed around recycling. But because of the kind of tenuous relationship they have in terms of land and sort of tenure, sort of without any announcement, the government can just come and destroy what are essentially micro-industries. And just within a matter of minutes, these kind of heavy machines, caterpillar, excavators, bulldozers can come and destroy people's entire livelihoods. So what makes the whole kind of thing upside down is when you have something like this, which is cleaning up the city, and then the government itself comes and destroys it. And it's particularly crazy when you think about the time of year, because right now the rain is coming. When the rain comes, you start to see you have flooding, you have water problem. And some of that reason is because all the gutter and the sewers and the drains, they fill up with this plastic waste, this poly bags, the pure water, all that plastic. It chokes the drains, it chokes the gutters, so then you have floods. So then you come and you break the very machines that are taking that waste from the gutters to try and use it for recycling. It seems somehow upside down.
On essaie de comprendre le comportement, ici par exemple, de supraconducteurs. Okay? Des supraconducteurs, c'est un matériau qui conduit l'électricité sans résistance, mais qu'on n'arrive pas à comprendre pourquoi il fait ça.
Pour être supraconducteur, il faut que les électrons, qui sont des particules chargées électriquement, qui se repoussent naturellement, parce qu'elles ont la même charge, il faut que les électrons s'attirent, au contraire. S'attirent en raison d'une autre interaction affective, et que ces interactions font que les électrons forment des paires, un peu comme des atomes, ils se mettent ensemble. Et ces paires, il y en a des milliards de milliards dans l'échantillon. Eh bien, ces paires se mettent ensemble et forment ce qu'on appelle un état cohérent, comme si on avait, par exemple, un défilé militaire avec 10 000 soldats qui marchent au pas, d'accord, et qui se tiennent par la main. Donc, s'il y en a un qui trébuche, il se fait récupérer par les autres, et donc ils ont une espèce de marche cohérente. Donc c'est un peu comme ça les électrons qui forment des paires dans un supraconducteur. Ils marchent au pas et donc de cette manière ils peuvent traverser tous les obstacles.
Yeah, second. You know, this is a very relevant material that people are familiar with. Like previously, it was imported from Europe as oil containers that we use in Ghana as water storage. And looking at the consumption of this plastic gallon, it gets high every single year. You know, so I'm interested in finding ways to transform those plastic gallons and to send it back to where they come from. because anytime I travel to Europe to work with this plastic gallon, it's kind of representation of Africa in our time. Africa now. It's not like a traditional marks, but a marks of our time. So like thinking futuristic of Africa, if Africa has water in the future, what are those gallons be used for? So this is just a take on how to transform those plastic gallons into very fashionable objects. Yeah. I thought about like doing my passport, so I kind of like trying to portray that experiences traveling with this Ghanaian passport in different parts of the world. And also using the marks that is very symbolic in my work, which represent myself. So I kind of use this black mask, which represent myself in my passport, and this like white background. Like once you migrate, then you realize why is color so important when you migrate. Because here in Ghana, we don't talk about color scheme, we don't talk about racism, nothing. But once you migrate, then you begin to realize, oh, I felt black, because it deals with color, humans, white and black. Came together to develop this concept of performing, trying to create awareness or use the art of performance to send messages across. Then people kind of get curious of what are those guys going to use this plastic for, so it also creates kind of dialogue and understanding among the community. For instance, like project that I'm working together with helping Puetra to do is actually for International Women's Day. So what we want to do is to create an installation and just go anywhere we want, just put it there. People come close to it, they read and they understand. The government is not supporting for this, funding our own projects, but trying to deal globally or also locally with the audience by taking this anywhere on the street and just put them there, and anybody comes to read it, fine. We are comfortable to give art to the community, without any price. We just give it directly.
Lamps are named after women. War machines are named after women. How can we teach girls that their sex defines them? How can we teach girls that their entire life is shrunken down to a pronoun? Have the years not taught us that women have wisdom instilled in their psyche? Has it not taught us that women are the single entity that sustains humanity? Find me a creature more profound than woman, and my mouth will hold more apologies than teeth. The city is filled with your scent. Hope wears you like a perfume. You break, you bend, you hurt, you heal, you rise. Do not let their disregard for your essence impair your magnificence. Do not let them steal the majestic smile from your cheekbones. You are light. Keep illuminating.
ce projet-là, ça consiste d'abord à sensibiliser la population sur les méfaits, les conséquences négatives du fait de jeter des sachets un peu partout dans la rue.
Actuellement, on transforme jusqu'à 300 000 sachets par mois dans nos 2 ateliers. Donc, c'est quelque chose qu'on souhaite vraiment faire développer. L'année prochaine, on espère pouvoir ouvrir... J'ai une mouche qui m'embête. Excusez-moi.
Ça ne sert à rien de créer un grand atelier quelque part, puisque les sachets, ça traîne dans toutes les villes. Notre idée, c'est de créer des ateliers un peu partout dans le Togo pour pouvoir recycler les sachets du milieu en question.
Et en même temps, pour compléter ce que dit David, et en même temps créer de l'emploi sur place. Il y a une série de métiers classiques ici que tous les jeunes déscolarisés vont apprendre. On appelle ça la série C, c'est couture, coiffure ou cuisine. Donc l'idée, c'est de créer des clubs environnement dans les établissements scolaires. Et les enfants qui participent à ces clubs environnement vont collecter des sachets dans leur quartier, leur village, communauté, parce qu'ils souhaitent avoir un sac à dos Zamké. Et donc, tu te baisses, tu collectes toi-même, et puis l'équipe Zamké vient récupérer tes sachets et coud le sac pour toi. On a déjà fait ça dans notre école à Couvé, et aujourd'hui, les enfants, ils voient les sachets par terre, et ils les ramassent tout de suite parce qu'ils ont compris... La valeur économique de ces sachets-là.
Le projet Zamké, en fait, ça fait du revenu pour pas mal de femmes dans la ville de Palimé.
On les amène à être acteurs de leur propre développement. Et c'est ça le challenge aujourd'hui. Je pense que c'est le cas de beaucoup de pays en voie de développement parce qu'on reste trop dépendant des aides financières d'extérieur et ça n'apporte pas grand-chose.
Pas tout bon. Ame se me fun to a. Ame ro to ta ntata re funu aro. Ame ro anu po won aro. Mi se han aro. O di ne. On a be berceuse. E bercer na me hala na be déjà.
E jinene. Kwa ya ona pe. E gana so ya me ona pe. Mi anke to ni ne aro. Akwa ze. Pia. Il essaie de parler.
Mais quand on est
Ah non, liaison. Non pas un.
un endroit
Oui.
où l'on
Recueille
les petits enfants qui n'ont
pas de parents. Très bien.
Moi, je me rappelle, peut-être que maintenant il est vieux, il oublie plein de choses, mais quand on travaillait sous le manguier avec les enfants, il avait loué des chaises. Il avait acheté des chaises pour les louer comme activité économique parce qu'il a fait un accident en 2000. À quel âge?
À l'âge de 42 ans.
42 ans, ouais, c'est ça. En pleine vie active et il avait tout perdu à ce moment-là. Plus de travail, plus d'argent, mais même plus de santé pour travailler. L'achat de ces chaises constituait une activité économique pour lui en les louant. Et moi, j'utilisais ces chaises avec les enfants pour nos activités ici. Et, je pense qu'on a tout cassé, les chaises. Et c'est de l'argent qu'il avait investi qui finalement a été un don pour l'association.
Je suis dit, mais prends la partie là, continue tes trucs, Après, je te donne toute la maison. Toute la maison sera pour toi si tu continues bien. Et elle m'a écouté et elle a continué. Elle a commencé ses activités sur cette parcelle-là. Donc, on était très contents et tout le monde l'apprécie. Et moi aussi, je suis fier.
Ton message pour les parents, là, que tu m'avais dit ce matin. Non, mais qu'il y a des difficultés dans la vie et tout ça.
Ouais. Et dans la vie, bien que je l'avais déjà dit, que bien que j'ai fait l'accident grave de circulation, mais je n'ai pas perdu l'espoir. J'ai la ferme conviction que je vais réussir ma vie. Comme dans la vie, David, dans la Bible, David a raconté Goliath et il a terrassé. La Bible nous a confirmé qu'il a terrassé Goliath. Donc moi, bien que je suis sans emploi, mais je lutte chaque jour que je vais réussir ma vie jusqu'à avant ma dernière respiration.
Est un bon gardien.
Très bien. Maman Adjo, tu essayes.
Lecture. Le chien de papa. Papa a un gros chien. Il se couche devant.
Applaudissez pour vous-même. Intéressant. Ok, merci beaucoup. Prenez les à droite et vous écrivez Marie. Ma, et le deuxième ça fait Marie. Et bébé, je vous dis que quand vous êtes capable de lire, ce qui veut dire que vous êtes capable d'écrire aussi. On écrit parle. Nous avons 3 syllabes. Parle. Mais on dit parle. On ne dit pas parle. Non, parle. Je parle. Se prononce un. Ensemble. Un. Ok.
The importance of place cannot be overstated because so much has become homogenized in the modern world in terms of what we buy, what we use, how we think, that finding a place that matters, that is distinct, and as part of our identity is something we've lost. And I think that's a profound loss, that we can't understand our identity without our place and other people that we've lived with for many years.
problem. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, good.
No home, no eat, no.
Huh?
Home. اللي يجيبوني شركة هذول أنا ما عندنا
I'm here since 6 months, trying to go UK, but no chance for me. But now I decided to stay here in France, to start my life here. I want to improve my life and live a better life, I mean. Of course, everybody knows our country is the most difficult country. The system there and the government and the life and everything is not available for the citizen. And I didn't expect the life here will be like this, because I shocked, and I think everybody the same. We shocked when we saw the life here. It's jungle and people. It's kind of unbelievable, but I don't know. I can't expect because it's the future. So just because I hope and I wish the good things will happen for me, and I will try to do my best, and I hope. We just try if the driver he didn't saw us. Okay, the car is start to move to the port, or sometimes by the train. And if you are lucky, we'll pass. If you are not, the security sometimes dropped us, and like this. Sometimes they have a dog, the British dog. It is very, to pass it, very hard to pass it. I mean, it can smell you since miles.
This is a poem by Adrian Henry called Galactic Love Poem. Warm your feet at the sunset before we go to bed. Read your book by the light of Orion with Sirius guarding your head. Then reach out and switch off the planets. We'll watch them go out one by one. You kiss me and tell me you love me by the light of the last setting sun. We'll both be up early tomorrow. A new universe has begun.
They say that our consciousness is something as mysterious as...
First of all, I'd say, you know, from a physicist's point of view, I don't think there's anything, you know, mysterious about consciousness. I mean, you know, it's just it's just a bunch of matter, you know, the brain's just a computer, right? The confusing thing is, how is that you know, how is it that, you know, some computer program can be that complex? So I think, you know, from a physicist's point of view, it's really just a question of complexity. And I think, you know, the best way to understand the mind is through thinking about how to simulate it, thinking about how to make computers do the same thing, and also thinking about statistics and complexity and things like that. But I think the really strange thing about consciousness isn't a physics thing; it's our experience of it. You know, the strange and interesting thing, you know, where is our experience of consciousness, and you know, that's a subjective thing, and that's where like art, that's the purpose of like art and music and things. They're not anything mystical. From, you know, they're nothing mystical. There's nothing non-scientific or non-physical about a piece of music. But, you know, it's beautiful and it makes us feel interesting things. And so that's the interesting bit about consciousness is our experience of it.